The morning began the way all mornings had for 66 million years, in fire. Not the fire that was coming, not yet, just the ordinary fire of a tropical sun hauling itself above the Cretaceous horizon, burning the mist off shallow inland seas, setting the fern-covered plains of what would one day be called North America into a blaze of amber and jade. The world was enormous then, loud, breathing. A triceratops, named in no language that existed, moved through the tree line just before dawn, her 3 horns catching the first light like polished bone. She was old, 40 years, which was ancient for her kind, and her frill had faded from the bright orange-red of her youth to a pale, weathered coral. She walked with a slight drag in her left rear leg, an injury from a rock slide 2 seasons ago, healed wrong. Still, she moved with the slow authority of something that had never, in 4 decades, met a threat it could not outlast. Around her, the forest breathed. Cycads, 20 feet tall, lined the riverbank. Flowering magnolias, still a novelty in this ancient world, evolution's newest experiment, dropped white petals into the dark current below. Dragonflies the size of human hands stitched patterns above the water. The air smelled of wet soil, decaying wood, and something electric that no creature alive could name or understand. She bent her massive head and drank. 3 miles north, the ground shook. It always shook when he moved. The Tyrannosaurus was not old. He was 11 years, prime, dangerous in the full, terrible confidence of his size. 18 feet tall at the hip, 42 feet from snout to tail tip. Each footstep pressed 6 inches into soft earth. He moved through the open floodplain with that characteristic forward lean, tail rigid behind him for balance, arms absurdly small, magnificently useless, tucked close to his chest. His scales were not the dull grey of old museum paintings. In the morning light, they showed hints of rust and burnt orange along the flanks, darker along the spine, paler beneath the jaw. He had not eaten in 4 days. His eyes, golden, sharp, capable of detecting movement at distances that would shame a hawk, swept the horizon constantly. He was not panicked by hunger. He was patient the way only apex predators can afford to be patient, with the deep biological certainty that eventually something would make a mistake. He paused at the top of a low ridge and stood absolutely still. Below him, a herd of Edmontosaurus grazed along a gravel bar where 2 rivers met. 40, perhaps 50 animals. They moved in the loose, constantly adjusting patterns of herd animals, their broad flat bills cropping at water plants, their calls low and resonant, travelling through the ground as much as the air. Several juveniles played at the herd's edge, their movements quick and bright and careless. The T-Rex watched for 11 minutes without moving. Then he chose the one. What followed was not graceful. It was never graceful. The chase lasted less than 30 seconds and covered 200 yards of churned gravel and spraying water. The herd exploded in every direction, their panic calls splitting the morning open. Birds, ancient birds, toothed and feathered, burst from the tree line in a dark, screaming cloud. Afterward, silence returned slowly, like water filling a vessel. The Tyrannosaurus fed. Above him, Quetzalcoatlus circled, vast, impossible creatures with wingspans of 35 feet, more pterosaur than anything the modern mind can comfortably imagine. They waited with professional patience, riding thermals on wings of hollow bone and membrane, their spear-like beaks ready for whatever the great predator left behind. That evening, the sky changed. No animal understood what they were seeing. How could they? There was no framework for it, no ancestral memory, no instinct shaped by anything remotely similar. But every creature felt something, The Triceratops stopped drinking and raised her great head. The Ankylosaurus grazing in the meadow to the south, armored like a tank, tail club swinging gently with each step, froze. Even the insects seemed to pause. A light appeared in the sky. It was brighter than a star, brighter than Venus on its clearest night. It moved, slowly at first, then faster, growing. It left a trail that looked like a scratch across the fabric of the sky, glowing white, then orange, then a deep and terrible red. The Triceratops began to walk. She didn't know where. Away. Every nerve in her ancient body screamed the single syllable of animal emergency. Move. The Tyrannosaurus, still at his kill, looked up. The asteroid hit the Yucatan Peninsula at 45,000 miles per hour. The first thing to arrive was light, a flash so total and absolute that it bleached the sky white from horizon to horizon across the entire continent. Animals went blind. For several seconds, the world was a single, overexposed photograph of itself. Then came the heat pulse, a wave of thermal energy moving at the speed of light's consequences, setting the tops of trees smouldering hundreds of miles from the impact site. Ferns browned and curled. The magnolia petals that had been falling all morning burst into brief, bright flame before the wave passed. Then, the sound. It arrived like the planet itself clearing its throat. A concussion that knocked Triceratops off her feet, that sent the Edmontosaurus herd surging in blind, mindless panic, that shattered the surface of every pond and river into chaotic patterns of displaced water. The Tyrannosaurus was thrown sideways, one leg buckling, catching himself, roaring in confusion and rage at something too large to fight. The shockwave passed. Silence. Then, from the south, the sky began to turn. The following hours were a transformation of the world so complete that every living thing on the continent experienced it as the end of reality itself. The impact winter was beginning. Ejecta, superheated rock launched from the crater at escape velocity, rained back down across the globe as a trillion meteorites, setting fires from California to Canada. The smoke rose, then rose more, blocking the sun. The Triceratops walked north for 3 days. She didn't find anything better. There was nothing better to find, but she walked because motion was the oldest answer to fear that biology had ever invented. She walked through the new ashfall, through forests where the birds had gone silent, past rivers running strange colors. Her bad leg slowed her. She ate what she could find. On the third night, the temperature dropped 12 degrees. She stopped at the edge of a shallow lake that reflected a sky now permanently bruised purple and orange. She was not alone. Around the lake's perimeter, in the settling dark, other shapes stood motionless. A young Pachycephalosaurus, dome-headed and confused, 2 Edmontosaurus who had wandered separately to the same water. Something in the reeds she couldn't identify. They stood together without aggression, without hierarchy, just animals at the edge of a cold lake, at the edge of an ending world. The Tyrannosaurus found the lake before midnight. He came to the water and he drank. He stood 20 yards from the Triceratops and he did not charge. She did not lower her horns. They were both too tired, both too confused by a catastrophe that operated on a scale their nervous systems had never been designed to process. For a long moment, a moment that lasted longer than either creature's remaining life, the 2 great animals stood at the water's edge in something that was not peace, exactly, but was its closest neighbor. The lake reflected the burning sky. The world was ending. It had been beautiful. The impact winter lasted 18 months. 75% of all species on Earth went extinct. From the survivors, Small, fast, warm-blooded, adaptable, would come the mammals. And from one line of those mammals, 66 million years later, would come the only creature ever to look back at what had been lost and feel the specific weight of that loss. That creature would call them dragons, would dream about them, would spend centuries
Absolutely
digging their
breathtaking,
bones
isn't
from the
it?
earth,
Incredible.
trying always to
I can't believe
understand what
something
they
this
had
big
been.
actually lived
They
here.
had been magnificent,